Welcome back to the Character Corner on the MTR Network. This is your host, Chris, and D-Bob here. And this is another episode of the Character Corner where we talk about some of your favorite comic book characters. We go through their history and comic book history and just talk about those characters. We're doing Iron Man Part 2 here today. Now, before we jump into this, we didn't have any new reviews on iTunes. You know, leave us a 5-star review, read it on air. Didn't have any new things like that. Before we get started into this, I just have to let you guys know. Some of you all have been so rude to Deepam and I the last couple weeks. The suggestions about us doing a Heroes Reborn episode, Character Corner, honestly, I came close to calling Homeland Security on some of you guys because, like, how dare you? How dare you with these kind of threats? What the hell's wrong with you? Like, we've talked about terrible art before. We have. I mean, there's Greg Land slander all, rightfully so. But Rob Liefeld takes bad art. It's actually an art form. I think it actually takes talent to have art that is just that. What the fuck is wrong? What the fuck were you thinking? The infamous Captain America image is terrible. With Captain America looking like, I don't want to say he's a bodybuilder. It's just like, he's got like, I can't tell if it's pecs or if it's bread rolls. Like, he actually looks like a Hawaiian bread roll container, like painted red, white, and blue. It's just, how after that did anyone keep hiring him for work? What is this? What was that, Deepon? What did I look at?
Don't drag. I didn't tell you to look at this. I would never do that to you. But you kept doing it.
I went down a rabbit hole because once you put in Rob Liefeld, and I knew what it looked like, but I wanted to remind myself before we got on the show just how bad it was. And then I found like it's a thing on the internet of people joking about how terrible his artwork is. It is actually quite hilarious. But then they also have images of other artwork that is of his. I'm like, how does he keep getting hired for this? And we know it's not like we haven't done this before. What was it? Wasn't it a mailbag ago when he was doing the cover for some? It wasn't an X-Men book.
He's doing that. They gave him an X book. They gave him, what is it, Agent X or whatever that new X book he's writing.
Right. But there was another one
it's really bad.
But there was another one he did where we were looking at it and we were trying to figure out like the different characters. Like he had like it was. We joked it on one of the mailbags before. It was actually just hilariously bad. Like I don't understand. It's just don't do that, guys. No Heroes Reborn.
Please don't.
We're actually skipping over the entire thing. And we're going to jump right into Volume 3 of Iron Man and go right from there. Before we get into that, there is something I want to talk about that kind of goes back to something we had talked about when we were doing Part 1. And, you know, towards the end of our Part 1, I realized that we were kind of, we kind of start trailing off, right? We kind of just like, oh, yeah, and then this happened, and this happened. We weren't really reading things.
It's not our fault.
No, it's not. It's, and what it was, but I was thinking about it, I was like, yo, why did all, like, the earlier Iron Man stuff it's actually not bad. Like, there's actually some really good stories in there, and you know, again, for their time and things like that. But then when we start getting, like, in the back half of some of those books, like, it's just like, I don't care about any of this stuff. And
At all.
Well, you know what it is, right? I figured it out. And we talked about this last time. We talked about how Tony Stark matters and the Iron Man did. And how that kind of affected what we were talking about between why Jarvis didn't matter to us, but Alfred does for Batman. And what got me about this is, and I started going back and looking at these books, not really reading them, but just looking at some of the themes for them, and I was like, oh, it's all repetitive. Everything is repetitive with the character because at some point, Tony Stark and Iron Man were still different people. You still had Tony Stark running around with a suitcase claiming that Iron Man was his bodyguard. And so all of the best villains that came after were technically called Iron Man villains. All of them are Tony Stark villains. The Mandarin, Tony Stark villain. Obadiah Stane, Tony Stark villain. Justin Hammer, Tony Stark villain. Like all of them Tony Stark. We didn't go into. We're going to go more into, talk more about Madame Mass and everything. She didn't fall in love with Iron Man. She fell in love with Tony Stark. That's the whole thing there, right? All this is about Tony, and I think that the writers started having trouble figuring out ways of making Iron Man matter for the longest time. And when we start getting into newer stuff, like we'll get into Volume 3, and when he finally comes clean about him being Iron Man at the same time, we start getting finally getting the blending of Iron Man and Tony. And so now they're one and the same. And then when we get into Extremis and the bleeding edge armor, we really get into him being almost more machine than man. And I think when they blended that, the stories, while they're very similar, hit similar beats, it becomes way more than just trying to tell. Because all these other stories were basically about, oh, Tony Stark is rich, let us take us money. Like, every one of the stories ended up being that way. Tony Stark is really rich, we want his money. So we have to find some way, oh, there's Iron Man, let's take Iron Man out. There we go. All that comes down there. But when you make the thing you're coming out not Tony Stark's wealth, but actually his mind and what he is, like if the armor is part of his body, and so you need to control Tony Stark, you need to control what is Tony, whether he's man or machine or whatever, then you start getting more interesting stories, especially when we start breaking down the Matt Fraction run, which Matt Fraction, we'll get into that shit. But
yeah.
So, all right, so let's jump into this. Iron Man Volume 3 takes place right after Heroes Reborn, which we just do not talk about. Let's see. I think the major thing that happens before Tony reveals his himself being being Iron Man is more AI stuff. So his suit at one point becomes sentient, and he has to take that down. And it's I want to say in the first 20 issues of Volume 3.
Well, what's interesting is that when they bring him back from Heroes Reborn, which, again, how dare you people send that shit to us? You know who you are. It's interesting because they kind of go back into the high corporate tier, like kind of the way he approaches things. There's a lot of corporate talk in the beginnings of this run. And kind of like with Tony, the idea of the sentient armor and it being a problem kind of creeps up on the reader as well, which I kind of like. I thought that coming back out of Heroes Reborn, I was really curious to see how they would change it, because there's a point in this series of Iron Man books that we're going to talk about where he becomes a very well-written, very complex character. Mm-hmm. It's not at the beginning.
No.
Too many authors, I'm trying to find this the best way possible, try to get Tony back to the inventor place by force resetting him. Mm-hmm. So by having a sentient armor that now he's scared of, you kind of force reset Stark. Mm-hmm. It happens again when Warren Ellis takes over the book, and you see the pattern kind of repeating itself. I think, and when doing all the reading, if I hadn't read everything, I would have enjoyed the beginning of this one probably more.
Yeah, like, to me, the entire volume 3 run is, for the most part, I mean, even like I said, it gets interesting. So 55 is where he comes clean about being Iron Man, and it's such a Tony thing. Like, he's saving a kid's dog. It's such a weird, it's such a weird out of character moment. It feels really strange.
Right,
it does. And even though the character, like the woman he's dating at the time, who I believe, oh man, she's the daughter of the guy who's trying to buy his company, and she's like, you kept all this from me and you did it all to save a dog. I did it for him, the boy. I'm like, oh God, it's so like, okay.
It's fine. So heavy-handedly written. That's all I'm going to say. It's very heavy-handed. Right.
It's like, okay, fine. Before 2 issues before then, I think it's his first use of Friday, which is his. I think it's the first time we actually get the AI voice in his armor. I want to say, yeah,
which goes away by the time where the next volume launches.
Yeah, which is weird. Well, so here's the other thing too. So when we get into volume 4, see, this is where that Marvel continuity thing does come up a little bit, because sometimes they just drop certain things. So 55 here is where he comes clean about being Iron Man. When we get into volume 4 and Extremis, he's still using the excuse that he's not Iron Man, and that.
Well, the end of volume 3, after it's assembled, he says that he's never going to pilot the suit again.
True, that's right. I completely.
He says he's going back Basically says, we're going back to the unarmed bodyguard, but that was never an unarmed bodyguard. Shut up.
Right.
Now it is.
Like I said, I didn't go through a lot of Volume 3. I read more towards the back end of Volume 3 because that's when...
I read it all.
Wow. So you want to cover some more?
Yeah, I read it all.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I went straight to...
Do I sound happy about that?
No, you don't. That's why I didn't read it all.
Good.
So. I'm
not.
There are
good stories. The Howard Hughes story I really liked.
Right.
I really like that. There are moments in the stories that I really enjoyed. Just as a whole, it didn't really left me kind of fulfilled. And the way it ends with an Iron Man imposter essentially killing his board and giving all the stocks back. They do a lot of clean slating at the end.
Well, the end is
kind of messily.
Well, the end is a whole dissembled thing that happens across all the Iron Man. Iron Man, all the
Avengers books too. Yeah.
Anyway,
it's the Avengers disassembled arc.
Yeah.
But what the tie-in here is kind of. And I get they're trying to break these heroes down to their core components so that we could align them with the movies we're making. I mean, so we could clean the boards. But it just felt weird. It was fine. It was. I reread it again this morning because I wanted to see if it appealed more to me, and it didn't. It just. Volume 4 is this Volume 3 or Volume 4?
This is Volume 3.
Volume 3 is here. Volume 3 is good. There are highlights, there are lowlights. The art is hit and very much miss, in my opinion.
Yeah, to me, with Volume 3, you can kind of get some of the big things, right? You can take us some of the big things. Him using Friday for the AI, him coming clean.
Secretary of Defense.
That was actually the big thing, right? And that was a big thing to me because, and to me, Volume 3, you're right. So what happened with me with Volume 3 is I actually read the Matt Fraction stuff first, then went back to Volume 4, then went back to Volume 3, and don't do that. I'm telling you guys, no.
Don't do that.
That is, but it gives you some important context for some things later on. But it's stuff you can kind of either listen to us for or just honestly read the Wikipedia page.
But I think what's interesting the way you read it is that you see the seeds of Fraction and even Ellis's run planted in this like kind of 55 through 87 of Volume 3.
Right, and that's the thing that I love about Marvel is even when something is hit or miss, you can then go back and mine it. And so the big thing here is with him becoming Secretary of Defense. The reason why he takes the Secretary of Defense job is once he came out as Iron Man, all his patents, which were under Tony Stark had these patents on the Iron Man armor, but they were patents that were basically say that the Iron Man suit were piloted by somebody that wasn't him. So it was like a legal end around that the government was using to try to get its hold on Iron Man technology. And so Tony, and again, this is where that seeds of what you're going to see a big thing on going forward in Extremis and in Volume 4 and pretty much everything after Volume 4, which is Tony believes that the safest hands are his own. It's like, all right, cool. If I can't beat them legally here, then fine. I'll take that Secretary of Defense job, and then I'm in control of it all anyway. So that's the way I'll control it. And the problem is, Tony, like, you didn't even run your company really that well, because that's not you don't care about the micromanaging things, and so but it shows you where how Tony thinks and where he's coming from, and it also sets up his antagonistic relationship now with government officials and with the military and things like that, which get played to perfect key in Volume 4, but particularly in the Invincible Iron Man run under Matt Fraction. Like that shit. Was that Invincible Iron Man? Yeah, Matt Fraction's Invincible Iron Man run. Like it really plays into that when you see that there. So again, they're not bad. Especially I'd say if you pick it up around 73, that the end of Volume 3, and pick up and read it to once it goes to like 88 or 84, something like that, like that. And read those. That I think that gives you a good enough setup going into Volume 4. I think those are important for you going into Volume 4. Even if they're not the greatest read, you need to know that, and you need to have that information there.
And there are very clear moments in there where you see like, there's a moment where Marvel decided let's make Iron Man a big book by putting big talent on there. It's right after Volume 3.
Yeah.
And so in Volume 3, you get a very ambitious writer trying to do things against kind of the Marvel machine. But at one point, when Tony's giving his speech to Congress about how hey, if we're going to be realistic about weapons, we need to have them hurt fewer people. I can do that better than anyone in the world. And guess what? Since the rest of the world, you say, oh, the rest of the world has other weapons, they won't follow those rules. Who do they buy their weapons from? Us. So if all of our private contractors are building safer weapons for user and for victim, and they end up selling them to these third parties, guess what? War is now safer. I was like, holy shit.
Yeah.
Like there are moments where I'm like, there's a really great, like tell that story. Tell that, don't write that story in his speech. Tell that fucking story.
Yeah. 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 That is that.
And whether it was time constraints or editorial, there are enough scenes in the back half of that series where I'm like, well, I get mad at Volume 3 because there's so many good stories that are kind of seeded and planted.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. Like I said, Volume 3 has it starts, and these are things that then people can come back later on and pick up on, right? And that kind of starts when you get into volume 4, when you get Warren Ellis.
Warren Ellis is crazy.
No, he's a crazy man. No,
Warren Ellis is crazy, like real, like crazy.
Yeah, but that craziness, I think, it really did start to redefine Tony Stark, and using these elements of this. And
so
go ahead.
One of my favorite things that Warren Ellis did here, and they did it some in the Ultimate Universe, but this is like the first canonical use of it. They tie everyone back to Captain America.
Yes.
By explaining the Extremis program as an extension of the Super Soldier program, everything in the universe makes a lot more sense and it's cleaner.
So Volume 4 starts, and is the Extremis art. There's actually, I think there was a one of those motion comics that were up on. They had it on. I think they had it on Netflix at one point. I don't know if it's still there or not. Probably not.
It's not.
And everybody's talking about Extremis, and obviously we use part of this for Iron Man 3. And so this is Maya Hansen, who was the biologist bioscientist who created Extremis, and this is word for word what she said, and to explain what Extremis was. Extremis is a super soldier solution. It's a bioelectronics package filled with a few billion graphite nanotubes and suspended in a carrier fluid. A magic bullet like the original super soldier serum, all fit into a single ingestion. It hacks the body's repair center, the parts of the brain that keep the complete blueprint of the body, a human body. When you're injured, we refer to that area of the brain. We refer to that area of the brain to heal properly. Extremis rewrites the repair center. In the first stage, the body essentially becomes an open wound. The normal human blueprint is being replaced with the Extremis blueprint. The brain is being told the body is wrong. Extremis protocol dictates that the subject be placed in a life support and intravenously fed nutrients at this point. For the next 2 to 3 days, the patient remains unconscious with a cocoon of scabs. Extremis uses the nutrients of the body and the body mass to grow new organs, better ones. So the story, the six issue story that Warren Ellis tells is actually pretty basic, right? This the Extremis bioagent gets stolen. Maya Hansen, actually, you find out later on, is she kind of helped release it, and some terrorist gets a hold of it, and Tony tries to take him down in his armor, gets beat, gets injected by has Maya inject him with the Extremis serum virus. He uses that, and it repairs. Not only does it repair his body, it's a different payload. Doesn't create the superpowers. It just takes out and allows him to focus repairing his body. He uses that to create this undersheath that controls his armor, so that he can control his armor and bring his armor to him and put it on. You guys know what we're talking about. It's a very simple story, very, very simple, right? What I think people forget though, because everybody focuses on the first 6 issues. These first 6 issues lay the groundwork for the rest of Tony's life up to this point.
Right.
Extremis plays such a huge part going forward, because it's not just, this is the first step in what we were talking about before about Tony now starting to blur the line between man and machine. He is no longer just the I am Iron Man. No, he is Iron Man. This is Tony without having an armor on, being able to bring in a bunch of data and check radio waves and control things without having his armor technically on. This is where Tony starts kind of in a way, losing touches with his own humanity.
You say blur the line. I say he obliterates that motherfucker.
No, he does. Absolutely.
Even issue 7, where he fights Crimson Dynamo, and he explains how fast things are happening for him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It eliminates the idea, and it's interesting because it's something they never really toyed with in the movies yet. They haven't toyed with it yet. We did not get even Infinity War. He's communicating with Friday to dictate actions.
Yeah.
Here he thinks and it happens. He is the machine. He is the operating system, and it's fucking terrifying. But because it's a Warren Ellis, you know that he knows it's terrifying.
Right, and this because so this happens, and as we're going through this stuff, so that's the first 6 issues, right? Of it just he takes on he's got the Extremis armor now, and he's using this stuff, and we're going to the next part, which is 7 through 12, which 7 through 12 then also lead into Civil War, which to me 7 through 12 do a better job of explaining what Tony's position is in Civil War and why he's so over the top than anything else. Because I had never read the 7 through 12 before. I just read Civil War.
Execute program, is that what it is?
I think yes.
Yeah, I got to jump into Execute program.
If you don't read Execute program, then Tony seems completely like he's out of his mind in Civil War. But you don't understand why. It comes back and you're like, oh, because Tony realizes what happens in Execute program could have been the kickoff of the Superhero Registration Act, and people wanted the superheroes to be brought to heel, not those kids being blown up in that town. Because what happens is Tony gets hacked. You find out was it Ho Jensen's? It's not his son, is it? Is it his son or is it like his grandson? I think
it's a relative.
As a relative. And you find out that while the man who helped Tony build his original armor in that cave actually put something into Tony that could allow him to be controlled. And what ends up happening is this kid gets a hold of the control unit and starts controlling Tony and so Tony gets turned into an assassin and he doesn't even know. And while it has nothing to do with the Extremis virus that's in him and his undersheath he's using for his armor, people are starting to get scared of Tony because even without him knowing that he's being controlled, people are getting scared of Tony because we think he's losing touch with the humanity. Is Tony okay? Like, what the fuck is what if somebody gets a hold of him? This also then becomes the idea of Tony Stark is now technically a metahuman himself, and what do you have when that dude is compromised? It's one thing when the armor is compromised. What do you do when the man is the armor and that is compromised? How does that happen? So, yeah. Again, these Warren Ellis is crazy. These 12 issues are what the fuck? But they do a good groundwork of laying down this idea of, yeah, Tony, you could have been the poster child for why there needed to be a superhuman registration. What just happened was S.H.I.E.L.D. and everybody else covered it up for you. And that is the thing that motivates Tony so much. It's the idea, it makes sense. It makes sense why he would feel the way he is. It's not saying he's right, but you understand what, Tony starts taking the weight of the world on his shoulder. And
right.
Gotta remember, he's also an alcoholic, so that's not really a good thing to do. It just isn't. So, and then I think this is right when Civil War happens, because a lot of times what happens with these books is you're reading these arcs and then a major Marvel event will happen. And this has happened several times throughout the stuff we're going to talk about here. So Civil War kind of
several times.
Yeah, Civil War basically plops down right in the middle of this arc. So Tony has his mess cleaned up, but then the New Warriors clash with a group of villains in Stamford, Connecticut, and while filming a reality show, which, I mean, it would have happened. It would have happened. And Nitro, one of the villains, ended up killing more than 600 people. A lot of them kids. And this is where the public opinion on superheroes kind of changes, and how you get, the Superhero Registration Act, which Tony is all for. And yeah, you get, like you said, this is, you get a lot. Tony is so wrong here. And just,
it's the modernization of Iron Man, but they break him in the process.
Yes. Because
eventually, we can agree, eventually they have to kill Tony and bring him back for the first of many fucking times. But this is the moment that Tony Stark breaks as a character.
And I think a lot of times we talk about Tony Stark, talk about Civil War, we're like, Tony was wrong, 100% wrong. When you start getting some of the side stories, and when you read the lead up to this, and you read the Execute program, and you read the even after that to the Iron Man stories there, you understand where Tony is coming from. It doesn't mean that he's right. I'm not pulling a villain agenda here, but you get it, right? You get what this is a guy. He has one of the mothers, one of the Stanford mothers, coming to him, telling him, you're doing the right thing,
I've always thought she was a Skrull.
She might be. She might have been. Honestly, when you think about what happens later on, she might have been, But from Tony's point of view, it makes sense, right? It's I'm doing this to protect people. I'm trying to help people, He has this grand.
Well, it makes sense on Tony's end because Tony got taken advantage of. But as opposed to fixing himself, he decides to fix the world.
Which is always
that's where the problem becomes.
But that's where Tony and that's the Tony that we've created that goes forward, and that's a Tony that we need to understand, which is different from the Tony we've had before, right? This is where Tony Stark becomes interesting, but he also becomes terrifying. It's also that weird thing of, and we talked about this before when we talk about like, do you even sci-fi bro and AI and stuff like that. It's like, imagine Tony is basically like turns into basically like Skynet, and it's like, ugh, do you really want that person to be the one that controls everything?
Yeah.
With everything else he has going on with him, it's like Tony is a very complex person. He's a very complex man. He's a man that has all this other stuff going on, and he's always given all this responsibility. So not only in all of this, like he does things like, and Tony kept pieces of Thor's hair from the first time they met.
Oh man.
And then him and Hank, like, I always find it like, we know how Thor handles Tony after he comes back, and finds out that what Tony did. Did Thor ever do anything?
I cannot wait to get to it in this story. By the way, cannot wait to get to this.
Did Thor ever say anything to Hank or Reed about this? Because
I'm pretty sure Hank dies at some point, or remember, because Hank gets replaced by the Skrull. I think this may have been. I don't know. It's hard to remember who did what because of the scrolliness of it all. But I know that whenever we do our Hank Pym character corner, we're going to read issues that are going to tell you things about Hank Pym that are going to blow your fucking mind. I'm very excited.
I'm just saying, the person that comes out of here looking the worst is Tony, but Reed and Hank aren't that much better. Reed and Hank are actually equally shitty in this. It's just that Tony takes all the blame because he's technically the guy in charge. But Hank, like, there's a moment in here where I'm reading this where, like, Johnny gets fucked up, right? Johnny gets messed up, and Johnny's in the hospital, and Susan's visiting Johnny and stuff like that. And at one point, I don't know who it is. No, it's T'Challa. T'Challa basically looks at Reed and goes, "Reed, go visit Johnny. Go talk to Susan. Like, what are you doing? What are you, dude?
Right?
Bruh." like Reed is so excited. Reed is that guy that gets so excited, and Susan even confronts Tony on this, going like, "Tony, he looks up to you. He admires you. He's trying to impress you. You are letting him do this shit, and it's literally tearing his family apart. You need to tell him to stop. Like, because Reed is just way too excited about doing all kinds of things like creating a negative zone fucking prison to hold superheroes. Reed is kind of trash.
Yeah, real trash.
Yeah, real trash, right? Yeah, nobody on Tony's side comes out looking good. Really? Nobody does. I'm trying to think if there are anything major things. I know at some point we'll go through more into the Civil War.
He gets Bill Foster killed.
Oh, well, that was the whole thing. I forgot to mention that with the whole Thor thing. You know, cloning Thor and creating a Thor clone that ends up killing Bill Foster. But hey, you know what? He did the right thing, and he paid for the funeral. Yeah. Does not go well. And Civil War ends when Cap realizes the damage they're doing and their giant battle is causing him and turns himself in because Cap does the right thing and then ends up getting killed by Susan Carter. But we'll do a whole Captain America character corner at some point to go through all that and what happens with there. But you know, we're dealing with this now. Tony is now the director of S.H.I.E.L.D. Because you know what, making him Secretary of Defense wasn't good enough, and now that was over, let's make him director of the International Spy Agency. What could go wrong? One thing I do want to point out: one of the issues that happens in Civil War is during the because what happens is Iron Man turns because you might find you're looking for Iron Man and it stops at I think it's like 14 or something like that. The book changes into Iron Man, Director of S.H.I.E.L.D. to carry on. But one of the issues is like 14, I think it's issue 14 of Iron Man Volume 4. Happy is seriously injured while fighting Spy Master and put in a vegetative state. And again, I think when you read the Iron Man issues that go along with Civil War, it doesn't make Tony right in Civil War, but it kind of informs you of his mindset and where he's at. And going back to what you were saying, he's still a man and he gets compromised because he's a man a lot. And when you have this man who can hide himself behind a suit of armor and you can't see his face, you can't see how damaged he is. And so basically what ends up happening is Pepper comes to him and basically says, I know you can, with your Extremis armor, I know you can reach out and connect to his life support system. Happy would never want to be on life support. He told me he didn't want to. You can turn it off. He was like, I can't do that. It's murder. It's like, nobody would know. You would know. I wouldn't even know. You know, I wouldn't know. And Tony's like, but I would know. And they leave it ambiguous whether he does it or not because the machine does go off. But I'm pretty sure Tony turned that shit off.
Tony killed Happy.
Yeah. He did it. I mean, he was asked to do it, but just the way he's sitting there and after everything that's going on. So there's a man now coming out of Civil War who's now lost one of his best friends. He's lost Cap, who he respected Cap. Like we really didn't go into that relationship a lot there. Tony respects the fuck out of Cap. Respects his fuck out of his teeth, right? And yeah, it's he's now because Cap ends up getting killed. He's now lost both of them. And so now you're stuck with him. You know, you have a director of S.H.I.E.L.D. who can interface with all of this technology and stuff like that, who is severely compromised. And he's not like he's not trying to do good things or doesn't have ambitions. His idea during Civil War, and something that carries on after the Civil War is over, is this idea of the initiative of putting a sanctioned Avenger team in every state, in all 50 states. So basically having 50 trained Avengers teams that are all under the control of the government. I mean, he's trying to go
more importantly, more directly under control of him.
Right. Because again, Tony has to have control.
That's who he is.
Who he is.
And this will become a recurring theme this half of the podcast.
Yes. The The back half of Iron Man Director Shield features the return of the Mandarin, and the Mandarin with Extremis, going after Extremis, and basically trying to weaponize that and expand that in. And you're going to see the Extremis virus and weaponizing that being a recurring theme because, again, the cat's out of the bag of what this can do.
Right.
And once something's out of the bag, you can never kind of replace that. At this point, the Mandarin, because I can't remember the last time they cut his hands off, so he basically has the ring surgically placed into his back. Because why the fuck not?
Because super normal.
Right, yeah, it's fine. And it's all very, like I said, it's all very compelling, but again, we're kind of just walking our way to the Matt Fraction stuff that really, really takes, I think this Volume 4 really sets the tone for the Tony we get in the Matt Fraction run. Also during Volume 4, I think it's also the World War Hulk stuff, and I think also those Illuminati issues as well. Right?
Right. See when they finally revealed that he and some other members of the secret community have been basically running the world behind the scenes.
I mean, yeah. And
let's talk about the end of Volume 4 though, because Secret Invasion happens.
Actually, no. Secret Invasion happens. No, Secret Invasion happens in between Volume 1 and Volume 2. Because when you read Volume 1 of Matt Fraction's run and then go into Volume 1, he's still Director of S.H.I.E.L.D., everything's fine. Volume 2, so then Secret Wars happens in between those. Because when Secret Wars, when you come back to Volume 2, all of a sudden things are changing. Like, what the fuck happened? It's like, oh, Secret War. Secret.
Oh no, I'm sorry. I was still in Iron Man. I forget. This is when they start running the book concurrently.
Got you. Yeah. So
there's like 6 months where they run side by side.
Right. You're right. So let's do the first volume of Matt Fraction run, then come back to that, and then Secret Invasion.
Okay. Perfect.
Because to me, the first volume of Matt Fraction's run really sets the tone. It really lets you know everything that's about to happen. The first volume is basically called Tony's 5 Nightmares. The five nightmares. And Tony has 5 nightmares that keep him up late at night. And he says the first one is that he gets drunk, right? The second one is that Iron Man would become cheap. They would become easy, affordable, and replicable. The third one is that somebody outside of Tony and Rhodey would pilot the Iron Man, because he's talking about how I have the most advanced Iron Man suit, and Rhodey has one too, but it's not as advanced as mine. Because again, that's a recurring thing that he will never give Rhodey one that's as advanced as his, or let him hold on to one that's as advanced as his. Because again, Tony has to have control of everything. That the Iron Man would become disposable, cheap and replaceable, and unremarkable. Number four. And then number 5, that the person who would make the Iron Man cheap, easy to use, and disposable wouldn't be Tony. Those are his 5 nightmares. And they set this up with, again, this is Tony still being the Director of S.H.I.E.L.D., and this shows it up with Ezekiel Stane, Obadiah's son, shows up and has basically turned himself into, and it's found a way to basically turn other people into walking Iron Mans using repulsor tech. Because that's also the other thing too to become serious, become more interesting here. It's not really the armor that is getting people, it's the repulsor technology in there. Because it's basically an unlimited power source. And an unlimited clean power source is, I can go a long places. And the other thing too I love about this is, and it also features the return of Justine Hammer and Sasha Hammer, the daughter and granddaughter, Justine the daughter of, and Sasha's the granddaughter of Justin Hammer. So you're basically getting, the legacies of some of the 2 people that broke Tony Stark down to his core, that literally took him out and made him basically a homeless bum. Their children are now gunning for Tony, and there's an interesting thing in this volume where Tony is he's kind of been, they've been one step ahead of him. Like the Hammers, their idea is, because their idea is to replace Tony as the contractor to the government, weapons contractor. And Ezekiel just kind of wants to destroy Tony Stark. Right?
He just wants to break Tony.
He just wants to break Tony. And so
you killed my dad.
Right, you killed my dad. I'm going to do this, and I'm going to and the end goal here is to basically set off 5. I think it's either 4 or 5 explosions at the same time that basically cut off Stark International at its core. Basically at repulsor tech and all the different facilities he has that are working on certain different things. So Tony's like, hey, listen, I'm director of S.H.I.E.L.D. right now, but the goal here is Stark International is still going to change the world, right? We're going to do all these things that are going to change the world beyond weapons, right? And so the Hammers are like, okay, cool. He's getting another weapons industry. Let's take his place. And Stan is just like, I just want to destroy Tony. So there's an interesting thing. We talked about this before about comparing Tony and Reed. Reed and Tony are having this conversation, and they're playing chess. They're playing 5 different games of chess at once, right? And Tony and Reed are talking back and forth. And Reed is basically trying to understand, like, Tony's like, yo, how are you going to stop them? They have you beat. They have you this. How are you going to do this? And Tony's just going to what we said before, like, Tony's good at multitasking. Tony's good at seeing. He's like, they've showed their hand. Now I know what they're going to do. Now I go back and I pick them apart. And I go from there. And during this conversation, like, you're going back and forth. Like, Tony will be like, hey, I got check here. Then Reed will be like, I got you check on boards 2 and 3. And halfway through the conversation, Reed stops and looks at Tony and was like, you have me on check on all 5 boards at the same time. How did you do that? And that's Tony, right? That right there, and that's why I want to cover this volume 1 first, is that basically sets up what Tony is. Tony is always thinking like 4 or 5 steps ahead of everybody. He's not always you might beat him, you might get him down, but if you don't really kill him, and even then, there's probably a backup. Tony has backups and backups, and that becomes in play. And so that volume really sets. He eventually, Ezekiel's able to destroy some of his facilities, and Tony's actually able to stop him at one point by setting off an EMP that basically wipes out, the repulsor tech in one of his facilities, and it's going to set Stark International back. But Tony's like, well, I still beat you. That's what I did, right? And that's the start of Matt Fraction's run. Now let's go back and cover what happens, because there's a lot. Like, there's a huge jump between what happens in Volume 1 here and what happens in Volume 2. So you want to cover what happens in that gap right there?
I mean, that's when he fails.
Yeah.
That's when Tony, all this level of control, this sphere of influence he's built since really Warren Ellis took over the book, it falls the fuck apart.
Yeah.
Because Secret Invasion doesn't just happen under his nose. It'd be bad enough if the Skrulls invaded the Earth on your watch as S.H.I.E.L.D. commander. That'd be pretty bad, right?
Yeah, it's pretty bad.
What if they used every piece of Stark tech to do it?
Yeah.
What if the thing that you've been seeding the government with, the world with for years, is their door in, is their way into every system on the planet? You talk about broken. That's Tony Stark disassembled.
And then
Secret Invasion was bad for the Marvel Universe. It was worse for Tony.
And then hack the extremist virus in you. So and then hack that. So even the thing that gave you the most control was hacked as well, and made it so you lost control as well. Yeah. It basically takes everything from Tony. Which and what I mean by everything, it is they take his reputation, they take his name. At this point, so when you come back in Volume 2, the name Stark is trash. He has been humiliated.
Garbage.
He has been he comes out to help at one point as Iron Man, and they're basically like, get the fuck away from here. We don't want you here. It is so bad. And they see, again, this is seeded in, they seed a lot of this in Iron Man Director of S.H.I.E.L.D. before this all happens. They who do they replace him with as Director of S.H.I.E.L.D.?
Crazy Pants Norman Osborn.
That's how bad it is that Norman Osborn replaces.
He's so crazy.
Right. And so when we come back to Volume 2 under Matt Fraction run, we're basically getting Norman Osborn taking over as director of S.H.I.E.L.D., him basically kicking firing Maria Hill, and Tony having to leave. But there's this one interesting sticking thing that kind of important, just a little bit of an important thing here is, as director of S.H.I.E.L.D., Tony held the superhero registration list, which has all of the identities of superheroes. And as director of S.H.I.E.L.D., that list should now technically fall to Norman Osborn, which could potentially be a problem. Potentially. Now, again, because Tony's Tony, the way Tony handled this was Tony doesn't trust anybody, and this is we talk shit about Tony and his feeling the best hands are his own, and that's not always a good idea, but sometimes it kind of is. Tony kept the only copy of the list was kept inside of his brain, because the Extremis armor basically let him expand his brain capacity and hold certain things. So he kept the only list out there. Of course, when Norman gets in and he's trying to search the database, the first thing he looks for is, give me the identity of who else? Spider-Man. Right? But, you get the next two volumes, which are basically called Most Wanted, which is Tony trying to erase his mind as Norman Osborn hunts him down. And so, in order to erase his mind, and this is literally what going back to what you're saying, this is an interesting and an amazing way to deconstruct a character. They literally deconstruct Tony. Matt Fraction deconstructs Tony Stark by taking him from one of the most intelligent men on the planet to basically being a man who can't remember what he's doing. Like it's literally a deconstruction. And I got to shout out not just Matt Fraction for writing it, but also was it Salvador LaRocca for writing the artwork, and then Frank D'Amato for the colors. Like this, the Matt Fraction Invincible Iron Man run. It's an Eisner Award winner, and it's for a reason. It's a great art. It's great writing. It's 11 volumes. The artwork is fucking phenomenal. It's great. And so basically what happens is Tony goes from Secret Stark facility to Secret Stark facility, and he's going from his most advanced armors to his least advanced armors because he needs a power source to kind of delete the what's in his brain. In order to do that, he needs to do that hooked up to an armor. But in order to escape, S.H.I.E.L.D. coming after him, he needs to be in armors that he can actually pilot. And as he's getting dumber and dumber, really, he needs armors that are less and less sophisticated. So it comes all the way down to him wearing the original armor.
It's a really, really good. So the thing I complain about, where everyone has to rebuild Tony on their own time, Fraction says, I'm doing the opposite. I'm going to break him. I'm going to reverse him step by step. Because it's amazing, because to wipe a computer is a hard thing.
Yeah.
And when it's the most powerful computer ever built, and it happens to also be Tony's brain, he made it notably hard to do. Mm-hmm. But you're right. As he's doing this impossible task, he's getting dumber every second.
Yeah.
It's really elegant writing.
Yeah. Something we didn't mention before, in volume 1, Pepper is actually injured, and she gets her own kind of repulsor tech. That's going to come in play later. Mm-hmm. Tony actually built her an armor herself, the rescue armor. Has no outward, weapons itself. Just uses magnets, and she started using it to rescue people. Literally rescue people. It's called rescue with her own AI called Jarvis. And that'll come into play later on down the line. But I had to make sure I didn't mention that. But I think it's the end of volume 3. Literally ends with Stark in the original armor battling a out of his fucking mind Norman Osborn in the Iron Patriot armor, beating Tony on a live feed as Tony's not even like defending himself, right?
And we've covered this in the Spider-Man character corner, but Dark Reign ends with them peeling him out of the Iron Patriot armor with a goblin face paint painted on. And Spider-Man said, "I told you he's crazy."
Right.
Norman's so crazy.
It's interesting reading some of the Dark Reign stuff from the Spider-Man book points of view and then the Iron Man point of view. Because there are certain times when you're going through the Dark Reign stuff in Iron Man and like Norman is so focused on getting Tony. Like there's one time when he was like, "We're just gonna go into Russia and get this." Like, yeah, we can't do that without their permission. We just kill them all. It's like we can't do that without. We can't do that. You do realize that? No, it's like you're like you see it. You're like he's going fucking crazy. He's out of his fucking mind. You know. There is a whole thing here with Madame Mass too. She's one of the people that was hired by Norman to go hunt down Tony. And like she's out of her mind too. Whitney's out of her goddamn mind. Like her love for Tony is just Tony, you make bad life choices and love choices. You really do. Really, really fucking do. So the other thing that Tony did was he's going around erasing his mind, but he also sent Maria Hill out to get this hard drive. And what you end up finding out that hard drive is it's a backup of Tony's brain pre-Civil War. So it's all the backup of what he has, but it doesn't include the registration. And so Volume 4 is kind of the Stark dissembled. It's literally them trying to piece. It's them hooking this. And honestly, it's an interesting thing because Stark has before they do it, he gives them a choice. He's like, listen, I need all of these people to be on board with this. He needs Thor, Captain America, who Steve is back now, but technically Cap is, I think, still Bucky at this point, but Steve is back. And Pepper. He wants they all need to agree to even bring them back because he gives them a choice. He's like, listen, the real question is do you even bring me back? I've caused a lot of problems. If you got into this, he's like, if it's gotten to this point, I kind of went a little bit out of control and might have gone a little bit too far. So maybe, maybe you shouldn't bring me back. It's another interesting thing kind of comparing Tony to Bruce Wayne. And it's that arrogant Batman thing of, hey, you had files on all of us. Superman saying to Batman, you had files on all of us. What about you? What if you went rogue? Well, I have a backup plan to take me down. It's called the Justice League. You're like, yeah, but you're just a man in a bat suit, right? So that's kind of a little bit more arrogant than nothing because, like, one of them can literally crush your throat. And, like you have to play around with the idea of, like, Batman really being able to take down Justice League, right? Like, we do it, but it's bat privilege, right? We get it, right? But with Tony, you're like,
I like that.
Right? But you're like, but with Tony, you're kind of like, no, but seriously, Tony Stark is a fucking problem, and he is a threat to the safety of the planet because Tony Stark is constantly doing things that could be a fucking problem. Like one thing we didn't cover when he was just in the part of the Volume 4 stuff is at one point to stop the airborne extremis virus that the Mandarin was going to send out. He literally has them launch a nuke to wipe out the virus. And granted, he did it to save more lives, but like Tony's a weapons dealer, and he's become the weapon, and the weapon becomes compromised. What the fuck are we doing, right? So it's just an interesting thing here with him making the choice. They have to make the choice of whether they want to bring particularly Pepper because he needs the repulsor tech that's in her chest. She no longer needs it to keep her alive. He's like, you need to agree to kind of go through this to take it out and put it back into me because I'm going to need that to kind of come back. And there's a whole thing where Norman's still trying to find him and still trying to kill him. And Doctor Strange comes in to kind of help Tony bring him back to the light and all this other stuff. But the interesting piece that happens here, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I really like I love this whole piece of what we read because like even the very beginning where it starts where Pepper can't reconcile him coming back.
Yeah, why do you get to come back and Happy doesn't?
Everyone else has to stay dead, but you can come back. And of course, also, I think you're about to talk about it, these scenes with the wasteland.
Yeah.
The scenes inside Tony's head.
Right. Yeah. It's all there. So yeah. So it's like it then like again, every one of these volumes is must read. Like we might skip over a lot of stuff here because there's a lot. It's a lot. But I found myself starting to read the Matt Fraction run, and I couldn't read anything else until I got to finish it completely. Like it is that good because it's this right now is up to this point is the breaking down of Tony to his core, and now it's basically if you think about it, because you got Pepper, Thor, and Steve. These are the three people that Tony has kind of hurt the most up to this point are the ones that have to decide if they're going to bring Tony back. Remember, we kind of skipped over it, but like Tony did come out and Thor did come back and whoop Tony's ass to kind of remind him that.
Oh,
yeah, we covered it in the Thor run. That's the reason why we didn't have to do it again.
So the two things I've loved to this point that we didn't talk about are that beatdown and when Nova comes back to Earth and explains what's happened in galactic space while they were having their Civil War.
Right. Yeah. Just small-minded people. Like you're so.
But also, even the smartest man alive, he was very focused on these things. Like Civil War, yes, of course, it started with ideological purity. It broke down to he wanted to beat Steve.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So they agree to bring Tony back, but there's one small problem, and I love that Reed kind of jokes Tony about this. Tony wasn't keeping the most up-to-date backups of his brain. And so there's a pretty big gap in his mind. And so Tony doesn't remember any of Civil War. And not just and apparently it comes out to it's not just sequential. There's a lot of things, he's got bits and pieces of certain things. So when Tony comes back, Tony's back, but he's not all the way back because he doesn't remember half the stuff that's happened. And so there's a point where Tony's basically locked himself in a room and is reading up on all the things he's happened. He's horrified at what he had become and what he had done. And it's another. This is a part of Matt Fraction then coming back and building Tony back up, and it's an interesting thing because not only building him back up, but he's forcing Tony to have to do something that no other writers really had him do before, which is come to terms with how terrible of a person he was to other people and the terrible decisions he made before. You know? And what you get is, in the rest of this run, is Tony kind of still taking it all on himself, kind of, but also realizing that that's what got him in trouble before. And that he isn't owed isn't owed people forgiving him, and that he has a lot to atone for. And it's when it's another part where Tony becomes interesting, because this is a Tony we've never seen before. We've never seen a Tony who comes out and wants to create a new company called Stark Resilient, which is completely out of the war-making industry.
There's no weapons application whatsoever.
Where before he kept the repulsor tech and everything that he made so close to the vest. And this was something that came out back during, again, this is where Matt Fraction took all the seeds before the stuff we were talking, some of the stuff from Volume 3, some of the stuff from Volume 4 with the Extremis stuff, because there's his old friend Sal, who kind of pointed when they were having those philosophical conversations between him and Maya about how, like, you just make weapons. What are you doing with your life? You could literally use the tech that you have to change the world, and not what you're doing. You're building better bombs. And so Tony's like, this is Tony coming to the realization, like, you're right, I could literally change the world. So what if we decided to make a non-weaponized version of the repulsor tech that can never be used to make a weapon, but can make clean energy that can literally change the world? And so that's what Stark Resilient comes. He has no money.
This is also one of my favorite eras of Tony.
Yeah.
I love the bleeding edge armor.
So we said we were going to do armors in another thing, but the Extremis armor need to be talked about. But the bleeding edge armor it has to be talked about. Where the Extremis armor was really just the undersheathing was stored in his bones, the bleeding edge suit in the actual armor is actually stored inside of Tony. This is called a bleeding edge, but this is actually Tony 100% becoming part machine. It just is. He's able to do, he is literally Iron Man at any point. You cannot separate the man from the machine at this point. It's always there. And
I am Iron Man means a whole new thing now.
A whole new thing. He wants to build for the future. I think wasn't it Norman and them that this is around the time that Asgard is above Broxton on Earth?
Oh, Asgard gets brought down during Siege.
Yeah, during Siege. And so Tony meets with Thor, and it's like, I want to rebuild. I want to rebuild not just Broxton, but Asgard for you. I want to do this, you know? And it's basically Tony going down this path of trying to redeem himself. Yeah, it's
I love that. I love the conversation between he and Reed in 25 about the bleeding edge armor.
Mm-hmm.
When he explains, we started eating meat because we needed more protein because we need to think more. Did you know that? To get smarter, we need more power. To get more power, we need to get smarter. For all intents and purposes, I've got a man-made star on my chest, Reed. Got so much juice I'm pumping into my head these days. Oh my, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's so like, and this is another time. It made the science cool. So the new suit takes advantage of your new intellect and dominion over your entire mind and body, huh? And an upgrade to Extremis as well as to Stark. Now this is what comes next. Like it makes the idea, and then you don't see the armor's not the issue. Like, how'd you get here? I flew.
Right.
And
Pepper just gives him the look like
the look like you son of a bitch.
Mm-hmm.
You're building armors again. He's like, kind of. But yeah, he apologizes to Thor. He asks him to help. The entire issue of 25, they lampshade this. They don't show you the suit, and you're kind of like, how's he even going to get? There's no suitcase. How's he? Let him figure out how to get home. Right. And then he just wills the suit on.
Right. Who wants to?
And the last line is, "I am Iron Man."
Yeah. Who wants to fly in helicopters anyway? You know, it's
it's so good.
You know, it is really good, and the suit is amazing, and it's just,
it's so cool.
It's this new idea of Stark becoming the person that he claimed he was, the man who's going to change the world, and that's what Stark Resilient is. It just so happens that person's also a person that everybody else is terrified of. And so all of his monsters come back, you know? And so Sasha and Justine, who you didn't know that Sasha Hammer was actually Sasha Hammer at the time. When you first meet her in Volume 1, Ezekiel's with this girl, is Asian, and you have no idea who she is. You later find out that girl was actually Sasha Hammer, and her mother are out to, you know, at the end of Volume 6, they get Zeke. They get the Mandarin to get the Zeke out of jail. And you're like, wait a minute. So now we got 2 Hammers, a Stain, and the Mandarin working together. That's gonna be a problem. And yeah, what you find is like Volume 7 is called My Monsters, and I really love that one because I think the end of that one is the one with Tony going back to his first AA meeting in a long time. And I really like that one because it's just like, it's kind of like almost a recap of everything Tony's been through. And him kind of explaining it's like, yo, it wasn't just the alcohol. It was the women. It was the behavior. It was everything. It was all of it was that. And everything I'm doing now still kind of triggers that. And every time I think I'm fine, I don't need to go to meetings, I need to go to a meeting. You know? And I appreciate, we talked about this before. Demon in a Bottle kind of made it seem like it was a one-off thing. Like he beat alcoholism in like 24 hours. Everybody since then, though, has made it a point that it's not. And later on, the way what Matt Fraction does that later on, and this volume is fucking fantastic. Great. There is one thing I want to, before we even get, because I think we're coming up on that soon anyway. Before we get into that, I do want to pull out the Invincible Iron Man annuals that they did. the 3 annuals that Matt Fraction did with the Mandarin.
Right.
Yeah. We talked about it before. We didn't cover the Mandarin a lot in the first volume because it's like it's kind of racist and kind of bad. What they did, what Matt Fraction did with the Mandarin here, it's great. It's so good, and you're just like
so good.
Like he basically kidnaps this director to basically do a "This is your life," and the director keeps he threatens the director, his wife, and all this. What you end up finding out is, the Mandarin's lying about his entire life. He makes this. He wants a director, and he's so obsessed with Tony Stark that he keeps telling him I want you to tell the accurate story, but the director keeps doing the research and trying to find this stuff out, and he's finding out it's like none of it's true. None of it's fucking true. Like his mother wasn't the son of some, some like European heiress. He was the son of some woman that worked in a brothel, didn't really know who his father was. Like all these, he made him seem like himself that he was a champion of the People's Republic. It's like, no, you were like a little rebel. Like none of these things you say were true. And the way the Mandarin handles that and the way he does it, you see how unstable and obsessed with Tony is. The final straw, he's like, all right, and this is where I kill Tony Stark. It's like, but Tony Stark is still alive. No, I killed him. No, we literally can see there's a newspaper that has Tony Stark's face on it. Tony Stark is still alive. No. And then I love the panel where he's trying to pick the actor to play Tony Stark. And he picks somebody who looks nothing like him. It's like, Tony was coming. Yeah, Tony came down to Vietnam, and he was trying to sell heroin. It's like, but that's not. No. He was selling heroin. He was a drug dealer, and that's why I tried to kidnap him and kill him, and all this. I'm like, but that's not true. A little retcon also. They make it so that the Mandarin was there. Was part of. Was there when Tony was kidnapped in Vietnam.
Right.
So small retcon, not a huge one.
It's the Marvel sliding time scale. Like
exactly,
all these things happen. Like it used to be Vietnam, and now it was Afghanistan. Like all these things get shifted, and I like the fact that, like you said, they don't disregard continuity. They add on to it. They say, "Oh, those are unnamed guys in that cave. One of those unnamed guys happened to be the Mandarin."
Right. So so the rest of the volume is basically then because there's also I can't remember what volume it is. I want to say. It might be before he gets his full memory back. And then one of the volumes, they basically do this alternate history of him in the future where Tony has 2 kids. The future.
Oh, it's issue 500.
500, yeah. The Mandarin is in control of everything. He's using Tony as a battery. The world is run, is being controlled by these giant mech machines. And the Mandarin's goal is to drill down the center of Earth. And they stop him in the future, and you get the rest of the volume is kind of leading towards that, even though it doesn't happen. Like there's an issue where he's with Peter Parker, and he's talking to Peter. It's like, hey, listen, I know I created this thing, but I don't know what it is, and I don't know why I created it. I need your help to help me track it down because the plans are now out there in the world. And so you get this weird thing of Tony trying to fix the things that he broke when he doesn't remember them, and also try to aim for the future. It's this battling his past while also trying to go towards the future thing. It's very, very intriguing. Let me see. And a part of also going through this volume is Matt Fraction also wrote Fear Itself. And this is basically when Odin's brother Cole comes back. And it's a big thing. In terms of Tony, the important piece here is Tony gets drunk again.
Well, he has to sacrifice something to the gods to gain access to their armory.
Yeah, to get Odin showed up. Yeah.
It's figured out very early that he can't win this fight unless he has outside help, and so he sacrifices his right.
So, yes, but I love the fact that Matt Fraction didn't give Tony that easy out of, well, you only did it to do this. Because what you later find out is Tony says, yes, one, there was, can't remember what it was. He had done something. Oh, when Tony, because some of the volumes when he's going to Fear Itself, when Tony is going to Paris and he sees all these people have been turned to stone. Like the entire city of Paris has been toned to stone. But yeah, and Tony is like devastated by this because he couldn't stop it from happening. He couldn't stop the gargoyle from doing this. Tony is just like he takes the bottle because he broke. Yes, he's going to sacrifice it but he had broke at that point. And Justine Hammer and Detroit Steel, which we'll get into later. I kind of skipped over the Detroit Steel. We'll come back to that later. They sent Tony this bottle, and Tony took it. He took it because he was broken, right? And he does do it to sacrifice to the gods. But then while he's there working with the dwarves, he drinks with them too. So I love the fact that Matt comes back to them and goes and says, like, you know what? The first drink I did, you could probably say I did it to save the world. You could. But all the drinks afterwards, nope, those are on me. I did it. I broke. I did it. And I love the fact that they did that kind of show you that this is a constant battle for Tony. He's an alcoholic. You know? Everything he's going through, everything is happening right now, it's weighing on him. You know? The Hammers have come back and gotten a contract with the U.S. government, created this new thing called, this new Iron Man-like mech called Detroit Steel. Yeah, God. With Lieutenant, I think it's Lieutenant Johnson in there, gets fucked up in the Paris fight with the gargoyle and stuff like that. So you have all this stuff going on. Like, it's all weighing on Tony. You know, he has a saboteur in Stark Resilient. You know, all these things are happening, and so this is kind of the final straw, and it set Tony over. And so he fell off the wagon again. The problem is, somebody knows he fell off the wagon, and the U.S. government is now subpoenaing all the data from the Iron Man suit because they want to prove that Tony was piloting the Iron Man suit while he was intoxicated. You later find out that's because the Hammers had put like some kind of tracking device in the actual alcohol bottle, and that's how they knew about it. And granted, it's like he did it, and he saved the world while he was drunk. So it's like, was it really that bad? You know? But at the same time, it's all there to discredit Stark. Because again, it's all part of the master plan of the Mandarin to break Stark down. Because you also see that the Mandarin also is kind of controlling Stark. And so they're trying their best to do this. So Stark ends up giving up the Bleeding Edge suit. He ends up giving that up, and basically surrenders to the Mandarin, who's again has hacked his body and controlling his body. Right. The end of this basically is Stark having to work with Ezekiel Stane to take down the Mandarin. Like this entire it sounds so fucking crazy, but in the large picture,
it flows so well. And the fact that this is you and me again, and I do this every time I do one of these long character corners. You give someone enough runway to tell a long story, they're gonna blow you away.
Like they gave him 11 volumes, guys, and he told one hell of a fucking story. Tony, the end of it is basically Tony doing something that Tony doesn't normally do. Tony gives up control. Tony gives up control of Stark Resilient. So that they can do this new technology. He had given up the repulsor tech. He gave up the Bleeding Edge suit. He basically, it goes back to that first volume where I talk about how he got check on all 5 boards against Reed. Stark basically lets the Mandarin think he's won when he already knows how this is going to end. But when Stark gave up, he was like, "No, I know what I need to do. I already figured this out." At one point he forced them to show their hand too early, and once you show Tony Stark your hand too early, he now knows what you're going to do, and he basically breaks it down from there. And so, yeah, volume 11 ends, and I think this is when we start getting into the Marvel Now stuff. Tony ends. Volume 11 ends with Tony building a new armor and going to space.
Joins the Guardians of the Galaxy.
Right, joins the Guardians of the Galaxy. So all that's there. And I think the next big thing, I guess, is the Axis Superior Iron Man stuff.
Yes.
Which basically inverts Tony in the worst parts of Tony.
So what it does, it plays up to the worst aspects of his personality. So he's drunk again. He's very irresponsible, and he's all about his ego to the point where he's got basically the entire San Francisco. Everyone's addicted to extremists.
Mm-hmm.
So he says that for $99, is it $100 a day?
$100 a day.
This upgrade makes you happy, healthy, beautiful, and possibly immortal.
Mm-hmm.
All you do is pay. And Daredevil wakes her out there. It's a good little mini arc with he and Daredevil. He gives Daredevil his sight back, but Daredevil figures out that he's given Extremis to the city through the water supply, and that the phone app can actually what activates it.
Mm-hmm.
He then brain damages Matt and throws him out of the city.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tony's lost it.
He's using a new liquid armor.
And this is all happening against the backdrop of the new Avengers world ending, the universe is ending, multiverse ending, story that's happening over where Hickman's writing.
Right. So when you compare, because I wasn't reading Superior Iron Man at the time, and I was like, this makes so much more. Because I was reading like the Matt Fraction. I was like, how do we get from Matt Fraction
to time runs out stuff?
To the time runs. I was like, how do we get? I was like, oh, that's why you have the Superior Iron Man, and this is not the Tony that had all these revelations about the good stuff we need to do.
But what I love about the end of Time Runs Out is that yes, it is inverted Iron Man at the end, and it is inverted Iron Man that in the cage. But when he thinks back, and he and Steve are in that diner talking about how it started, when he talks about Avengers World, he said, "You knew then that we couldn't win, didn't you?"
Mm-hmm.
Pre-inversion, pre-all of it, he knew that the universe was going to come to an end, and he'd let everyone think they had a chance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because while these aspects of Tony's ego were being played up and played upon by the Access inversion, he is those things.
Yeah,
he always knew.
And the thing about it is, when it comes to that kind of stuff, he's not going to. He wasn't gonna not do that. He wasn't like even without the inversion, the stuff that happens in Hickman's Avengers and Secret Wars, in Hickman's Avengers, Tony still would have done. He still would have done.
100 times out of 100.
He still would have done. You know, I think that's also part of the stuff with the Planet Hulk stuff and World War Hulk stuff. You know,
yeah,
all that stuff happens. See anything small things. Original Sin reveals that Tony modified the gamma bomb that turned Bruce Banner into the Hulk, but it kind of save him. So it's not.
Yeah,
it wasn't as bad as you thought.
And also the stuff we're learning about Hulk and Immortal Hulk. Well, I don't know how much it even mattered.
Right. So. Yeah, we've done the Figurements Avengers stuff, so we're not gonna cover that stuff again. We covered that to death. I guess we come into all new Marvel, the Bendis Iron Man run. Right?
I really liked it.
Yeah, I did too. Well, I like that, and also reading the International Iron Man stuff with the revelation about Tony's parents.
So reading that, I had not read all of that until we did the reading for this. I had read the Bendis stuff. This was my first time reading the parents stuff.
Yeah. And it brings you this new idea that, you know, Tony has this issue with Howard Stark the entire time. We later find out that Howard he's not his birth kid. Howard and Maria Stark, they adopted the child because Tony's original mother was Amanda Armstrong. Turned out to he was a rock star, but ended up being also an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., who fell in love with a double agent who was worked for S.H.I.E.L.D., but was also a Hydra agent. And so when Amanda gave the child went in adoption, but Maria and Howard couldn't have kids. So when Howard found out that they were taking this kid and they were putting this kid into an orphanage somewhere in some Eastern European country, he went and got the kid and raised a kid of his own, and that's what happened. And you're right, it's done really, really well. I love that, and I also love in Bendis' run for in regular Invincible Iron Man. Obviously, we have the induction of Riri, but we also have the new improved Victor Von Doom, right? Mm-hmm. And that whole thing, I love that. Like, it's just Victor showing up every 5 minutes, and Tony going like, "What are you doing here? Why are you here?
Why do you keep showing up?
Leave me alone. Leave me alone." And then there's also Civil War 2, where it's Tony going like, "Hey, Carol, I did this thing. I did this before. You don't want to go down this route. It's a bad idea. It's a bad idea." I did really like the issue, the standalone Iron Man issue, not standalone, but the tie-in Iron Man issue, where they both end up at a meeting.
Yeah.
That's great. Because it was a weird thing. Tony going. So when you come back in the all new Avengers, you have Tony's no longer inverted anymore. So you're kind of going back to that. You're getting the Tony from Fraction's run, the Tony that wants to change the world. That can be an asshole, yes, but at the end of the day, he really is trying to do less harm than he normally does, you know, and be more responsible. It's a weird thing to say Tony Stark is responsible, but it's that kind of Tony, right? But
that's important because that's the goal. You're right.
But that's him, and so in the middle, he's going through all this stuff, and Tony's like, I need to go to a meeting. I need to go to a meeting, but I can't go to a meeting because, oh my God, I'm Carol's sponsor, and Carol probably needs to go to a meeting too. I was just like, this is Tony caring. This is ridiculous. I've never seen Tony like this. Like Tony almost doesn't go to a meeting because he's afraid that he'll run into Carol, and that Carol will probably need to go to a meeting too, an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. It's fun. And then of course he shows up at the meeting, and then Carol's there too, and you're just like, God damn it.
Of course.
But then they have a conversation. Carol doesn't listen. But you can see that, and that's one thing that stood out to me about the entirety of Civil War II, was like, this is how stark of a difference it was between this Tony and the Tony that was in Civil War.
It's almost like Mark Millar's a bad writer, anyway.
Yeah. Because this Tony was sitting there going the entire time, basically going, I did this before, guys. This does not, he just wants people to listen. Like, I've done this before. It does not end well for any of us. We don't want to go down this route. Trust me. I've been the bad guy, and nobody listens to him.
Yeah, he's like this. No, if Cap's on your side, you're wrong. What? Right. I'm sorry. Like the Cap test.
Right.
Right. So I don't like it any more than you do, but it's true. He's right a lot.
Right. So at the end of that,
but it's also colored because the kickoff event that made the fight happen is the death of his best friend.
Yeah, that too. You know. The death of Rhodey. And then we get into the modern stuff. So in the Civil War II, Tony's taken off the board for a little bit, put into a coma. We get Riri. We'll cover her into one of those legacy episodes we're going to do. And then Victor Von Doom takes over as Iron Man, which I got to say, I love that fucking book. I'm not going to lie. Because
Tony dies again.
Yeah. Tony dies, but of course Tony comes back.
Which, let me just say this. I get it. I get that a lot of the appeal of Tony as the inventor is the guy who invents things to save himself. Can we slow down on killing? Am I wrong? Like, it just, especially having done this reading together.
Yeah, no, we got to stop killing him. We got to stop killing him.
Like, because you're right, Tony dies in Civil War, but he is now in a persistent vegetative state because, of course, he's experimenting on himself enough to where he can't be killed, actually. But his brain's gone. So now his brain is running. An AI extension of himself is running Riri's armor. And Victor Von Doom is taking inspiration from Tony Stark. I loved it because it felt so weird and different and off. And it's kind of, if Bendis is going to leave a property before as his last touch in Marvel, I'm glad it was Iron Man. I'm glad he got to make changes that were going to last.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I appreciate. We gotta stop killing him though. We gotta find another way. But all the other thing too is like at some point, I think you had to take him off the board, right? You had to at this point you had to take Tony off the board, to make him matter again.
Hand the helmet to Rhodey and have him go into seclusion.
True.
Give us a mystery Iron Man that's not a mystery that everyone is reading knows it's Rhodey. Everyone in the book knows it's Rhodey, but he won't confirm it.
Mm-hmm.
Let's make that give me 12 issues of that.
Right.
And just take Tony off the board. There are so many other ways, and I get it. I understand it. And having Tony as the mentor AI for Riri was a pretty cool conceit. Yeah. Not gonna lie.
Yeah, no, it was great because him, the AI during Secret Empire was actually pretty good. Like I'm not gonna lie, it's like that. Wasn't it the AI that started talking shit to? Wasn't it the AI was talking shit to Hank Pym / Ultron?
Yeah, because it's still Tony.
Right. I'm sorry, yo. I'm sorry. I love that. I love the fact that it's still Tony, just in AI form.
Because during the meeting, during Secret Empire, there is a moment where the pro-Hydra and anti-Hydra forces meet up at Ultron's castle, and he makes them sit down to have dinner. and Ultron ruminating about how they used to be a family, and the goddamn AI is like, "We stopped being a family when you started beating your wife." So that's why it should never work. You hit your wife, Henry. It's just like, we couldn't let him at home. Like, he's in the suit. I had to bring the suit. Like, I'm sorry. Like, Riri's like, we should fuck up. Well, where's the volume on this thing? So it's like, and another motherfucking thing. Like, what you don't realize is that Tony is an AI. There's no way to, like, talk over him.
Well, I got to say this. I guess we'll cover the AIs a little bit more when we do the armors too, man. I'm not going to lie. I love the way, when in the Fraction run, and what was it, a Fraction run? Yeah. No. The Bendis run.
Volume 3.
I love.
Oh, Bendis. Yeah, Bendis first.
I love. Well, he wasn't first, but I love Friday in the Bendis run because basically Tony basically lets Friday run the company, and has basically told her like there's one point where Tony's like, okay, she's going through his schedule. She's like, okay, you gotta meet these kids at St. Jude. He's like, oh, cancel that. He's like, no, you can't cancel that. You told me not to let you cancel that. He's like, no, we gotta cancel. He's like, and she plays a recording of Tony going, hey, Tony, this is Tony. Listen, you can't cancel this meeting. Like, she's just as much of an asshole back to Tony, and it's fucking hilarious. Like, when in that Bendis run also, I think it's MJ, Mary Jane, shows up and is going to be hoping get Tony's brand back.
She's new Pepper.
Right, she's the new Pepper. And it's funny to me because at one point, like, Friday just talks like she's a regular, like, to everybody else. Like when the stakeholder shows up, Friday talks like, you know, an AI and kind of is like a little bit. When she's around everybody else, it kind of just says things. Like at one point, she makes a joke about AI taking over the world, and MJ's just like, yeah, maybe the AI shouldn't be talking about taking over the world. That's a little frightening.
Some jokes aren't funny.
Yeah, some jokes aren't funny. Yeah, some jokes aren't funny. Maybe you shouldn't do that. So, yeah. So, and now Dan Slott is writing Iron Man. Yeah.
Man.
So
I'm behind.
I'm behind in that one too. I started reading it before, and it's great because it's going back to it feels like it's a carrying on what Matt Fraction was doing with Tony trying to
resilient.
Be, you know, right? Yeah, being an innovator and bringing this stuff to the world.
Right.
You know?
It has a lot of echoes of Stark Resilient, but it's also going forward with some of the. I don't know if you've ever read the Secret Avenger stuff. I forget who wrote it, honestly. It might have been Fraction, who talked about kind of the AI apocalypse and what was coming with the Deathlots, and that's kind of where Slots, a thread that Slots picked up on that I've really enjoyed. I need to catch up. I am like probably 6 issues back.
Yeah, like there's a lot of good stuff here.
A lot of great stuff. Like the late run Tony, when they decided as a company that Tony Stark was going to matter, holy shit, things pick up in a hurry.
Yeah, it's a fascinating. Tony Stark is a fascinating character. Especially, like I said, the back half of Volume 3, I think Volume 4 and the director of S.H.I.E.L.D. or stuff is very, very important.
I would argue that them putting Warren Ellis on the book was the announcement that this character matters now.
Yeah, I'd go with it.
I think that's the breaking point where it's like, so before it's pretty good. There's some seeds of good stories, like we said. Even the Ball's good story. The Armor Wars is entertaining. There's stuff that's in there, but once you get to that first issue of Iron Man, Warren Ellis, read from that point forward if you want your modern interpretation and kind of understanding. Because guess what? They tell that origin story every 12 goddamn issues. I swear. They really do. He was in a cave. He built a suit. He got out. He gives in a cave, he built a suit, he got out. Now he's in his brain, but he's still in a cave. He still built a suit, he got out. Now he's in his brain, and it's not a cave, but it's like a wasteland where he's digging for the suit. Anyway, he gets out. The suit and Tony are so inexorably tied that, again, for me, like the zenith of Iron storytelling is going to be the bleeding edge armor, like soaring in his bones. Like that is, for me, that's, if you had to end certain superhero properties in certain places, I'd have ended X-Men Dark Phoenix Saga, Don't At Me, and I'd have ended Iron Man right there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, it's an interesting thing, and I think it also ties into, you know, obviously, when you look at the timing, it all times in well with when the movie and the characters were coming in, and we're going to do a movie for it. Because I want to say the Extremis stuff is what, like 2004, 2005?
Oh, none of it's a mistake.
Yeah. Yeah.
By now, they know, if not on the writer, on the boots on the ground, but editorially, they know that they're making a move to move finances around to finance this movie.
Right. And so you start doing something to really make a theme. You get out of, okay, we have Tony Stark, we're going to do this. You need to make Tony Stark matter almost more than the Iron Man suit. So how do we do that? Because right now we haven't done that. And it starts with this Volume 4 stuff. That's when it really starts. You really get this. You're like, is he man? Is he machine? What is he? Is he the innovator? Is he the futurist? Like, what is Tony Stark and why is he important? Why is he the guy that you want on your side every time? You don't want, like, you, even when, like, that's an interesting thing. I think we covered this when we did the Hickman run stuff. Like, even when Tony had gone too far, even when they were all fed up with Tony, at the end of the day, they were like, we still need Stark. They
all voted to bring him back without hesitating, save, of course, Pepper. But she had her reasons. Her husband's dead. I get it.
Right. Well, not even then. I'm just talking, even in the Hickman run, it was like when they were just like, yeah, we need Stark. Stark's out there somewhere. He's going to have something up his sleeve because that's what Stark is.
Oh, yeah. Even like Maria Hill being like, God damn, we got to go find him, don't we?
Right. It's just like, he gets on my fucking nerves, but he that guy.
He's very good at this.
He's very, very good at it. Tony Stark we know you have it's that thing of, when that recent Batman in Heroes Reborn is like, hey Bruce, we know you got a kryptonite ring on you. No, I don't. We know you have a kryptonite ring on you. No, I don't. Okay, I have a kryptonite ring on me. It's like,
okay, fine. So why do you care that I got the ring?
Right. And that's the thing with Tony. Like, there's an interesting thing in the business run. I think it was so the international Iron Man stuff talks about he's dealing with. You also kind of get the Cassandra, the woman that kind of broke his heart and kind of sent him down the path of him kind of being a womanizer a little bit. He's talking to her, and he's sitting there without his armor on. You think he doesn't have an armor on when you find out he's got camouflage on it. It's like he always has it around. It's like at this point, you don't even know when Tony has the armor on and when he doesn't. It's like, it's just a part of him. It's there. It's just.
Well, that's also, he doesn't trust anyone.
Yeah, that too. Yeah. Tony.
The armor, it becomes a very heavy metaphor later because he admits, he's like, I don't trust anyone. Like, I don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, I trust you. Sure. Right.
Yeah. And even then, it's compartmentalized, right? Like, he trusts Rhodey with certain, like, during that run, the Matt Fraction run, at one point, Tony, I think, that's the one, he fakes his death.
Yep.
And he fakes, well, not even fakes his death, he disappears. And he gives a new suit to Rhodey. And Rhodey's going around, as
Iron Man.
Yeah, as Iron Man and stuff like that. And it's like, that's what it is. They fake Rhodey's death, then Tony disappears. So, and they don't tell anybody. Don't even tell Pepper. And like, granted, he had good reason to tell Pepper because we find out later on that the Jarvis AI kind of been compromised a little bit and was kind of, a little bit compromised. So it's like he has reasons for it, but it's like, how much for a person who's that paranoid, he doesn't trust anybody, how happy can they really be? Right? And yeah, so anyway, folks, that is our full second episode on Tony Stark and Iron Man. Again, we'll do another small one real quick, like 30 minutes, 40 minutes on the suits. We'll do that in a couple weeks here. So I do want to kind of make the small announcement on the next thing we're going to cover. Now, I know normally we go Marvel, DC, but we have good reason for going back to Marvel for this. So in June... Hey,
do I know what you're about to say?
I think you know what we're about to say. You know what I'm about to say. You do.
Do I know?
Yes, you do know.
Okay.
I talked about this. We talked about this. We did.
I forget things. I have to be reminded.
You forget me, but you're going to be excited when I tell you this. So in June, we're doing LGBTQ characters across Marvel and DC. We're doing that for Pride. I think that's Pride Month. So we're doing that. But in May, we're doing this one big. And it's not really a character corner. We're going back to our thing of doing runs. And it's a big one because we're celebrating. We're celebrating the end of the Fox X-Men movies. We're doing the Chris Claremont run of X-Men.
Oh, hell yeah.
See, I wasn't, yeah, see.
I was talking about Claremont X-Men yesterday. Someone, Dan Slott, tweeted about, said, what are the moments that now that Marvel or Fox and Marvel are together again that you dying to see? And he put his 3 up there. Let's see what his 3 were. His 3 were, I want to go back to the tweet thread. His 3 were a Hulk thing fight, which I want to see, an adaptation of the Spider-Man story, Nothing Can Stop the Juggernaut, great story. And 3 was Spidey and Torch building the Spider-Man together. I wrote Colossus Juggernaut bar fight. And he said, you could have done that before. And I said, oh, I know, but did any of us trust them to put the characters overpowered enough to get that fight for that reasons? For those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, Uncanny 183 is a perfect comic book in my eyes. It is when Peter breaks up with Kitty and then feels bad about doing so he goes to the bar with Nightcrawler and Wolverine. He happens to see Kane Marco, the Juggernaut, there. But doing nothing, enjoying a beer on a date, and he picks a fight with the Juggernaut because he's so mad at himself. And Wolverine and Nightcrawler don't even help. They're like, you know what? Fuck it. Fuck it.
You basically, you know what? You broke Kitty's heart. This is all on you, buddy.
Yeah. And so they let him get his ass kicked by the Juggernaut. It was like the most reluctant fight ever. He's like, I came here to, I didn't want to do this.
Right, I'm not here for this.
Leave me alone. It's so good. It's so stupid.
Oh man, yeah. So we're gonna do that. We're gonna talk about that run in May. So I don't know how many episodes are gonna be, but that's gonna be our May going into so we can celebrate.
I'm very excited about that one. That's gonna take a while.
Yeah, it's gonna take a while.
It's gonna take a while.
Yeah. So there you guys have it. Again, folks, thank you guys very much for listening. I love all of our new listeners. We've been getting a ton of new listeners on this show. You guys really love it. We love doing it. Like, this is the one show that I do not dread doing at any point. So we will be back soon with those other episodes coming soon. Like I said, keep an eye open for our special it'll be a bonus episode. So if you only listen to us on the MTR Network feed and not the Character Corner feed, you are not going to see that Armor only episode. So you got to make sure you subscribe to the Character Corner itself, and that way you know how to get it. And again, you can get us on Stitcher, you can get us on Spotify, iTunes. We're always there. Search for the Character Corner, and again, leave us a 5-star review, and we will read it on air if you leave it on iTunes. So on the Character Corner feed. So again, folks, thank you guys very much for listening, and until next time, we are out of here. Peace.